So I was figuring we could talk about. Actually, I sort of wish that this was more like everybody could talk out loud. Maybe we should try a Twitter space sometime instead of just having uh, good morning. Instead of just having me be the only speaker and y'all. Okay, cool. Thanks for the happy anniversary there. Cool. So I might try Twitter Space sometime also. It's just most people who follow me on YouTube because that's where I started. And so, call it good. Okay, so anybody have? I have a number of topics I can talk about, and but I want to see maybe somebody else has particular questions first. I'm not quite going to do an ask me anything, but I might answer some questions. Or if not, I can go into some other topics. Hello. Okay, so I don't have any questions, so I'll talk about some stuff, I guess. Um, so I can mention, well, I can mention some things about the upcoming videos. I have one collaboration video that's almost out. Been working on that for a few weeks. I also have an interview that I just did a couple weeks back that I have only started putting the backgrounds for on that. And I also have, and that's the interview I just did was for. Okay, that's a good question. I'll finish what I was saying, and then I'll get to your question, Mike. So the interview I just did was for a relatively smaller language because I want to be able to mix in smaller languages along with bigger languages. And I want to eventually interview like all the people with like all the most well-known languages. And some of them I like more than others. It doesn't really matter how much I like them. I can interview people anyway. But I figure, number one, it's cool to be able to have those big interviews. And secondarily, there's the issue that if I interview the biggest people, then if I interview smaller people as well, people know that I chose it on purpose. You know, it's like, say, I'm interviewing this person or this for this language that's not as well known, but but I did that because I chose to. I found this would be a very interesting language for reasons X, Y, or Z, and I did that because I could, not because I couldn't. I could talk to, and I choose to talk to some of the biggest people, but I can talk to anybody else I want to as well, and people can know that it's by choice, and so I enjoy that concept. Anyway, what would be the languages for 2020? Predicting, not history. Okay, because I did that video in January for the recap of 2021. No, and I didn't do a prediction. What would it be like for 2022? Big languages. Well, let's go look at language right now. In fact, language is actually an interesting topic to go through. Language trends. I did the update most recently. Oh, look, my video here. This video actually I had this like heyday moment in my first year when all of a sudden started getting a lot of momentum. And then I had that Hello World video that for some reason took off like crazy. And this one like rode along with it for a while. I had like 30,000 views on this video. But here's the current language stuff. I just put up the updates for Q3, having gotten them from GitHub. I have been, actually let me turn off Dark Reader on language. Yeah, I think NIM. I'll get that. NIM's a really good question also, but I'll talk about this part here first. So I really badly want to get Stack Overflow and Reddit and Wikipedia stats into language instead of just GitHub. But when I'm looking at trends, I really look at these kind of trends here. But one of the things I did recently, I did the Q3 updates after getting from GitHub. And I changed my mean a little bit here. So if we look at the mean here, I was doing just a straight up mean, and even just an arithmetic mean, although perhaps I should be doing a geometric mean, I'm not sure, of the issues, pull requests, pushes, and stars. The thing is I changed that because this is totally bogus in my opinion. So when under the pushes, JavaScript was going up like crazy earlier. And the hypothesis I heard from, I think from one of the viewers even, one of the subscribers to my channel, said, I think maybe that was going up because of the bots that say, hey, you have all these out of date, node dependencies. So please do automatic, this and that. And so I think the bots putting people to do extra pushes on GitHub is why JavaScript was going up so high, much faster than the others. It came down during Q2, and I thought, well, maybe that's correcting for itself in some fashion. But then this happened in Q3, which is just totally ridiculous. JavaScript did not really become suddenly that much more popular over one quarter. And so if I included that in the mean, it was skewing all the results. And so the mean, I just changed it so even historically, pushes are not part of the mean anymore. And so in this version of the universe, we see JavaScript peaking in 2016 and coming downhill since then. While meanwhile, Python's been coming up. And I think Python's interesting because Python, if you notice, maybe had a downward trend and was having to deal with all the Python 3 conversion debacle stuff. But I think that basically deep learning saved Python. And Python can use a lot of other stuff also, but it's just deep learning was such a big deal that it single-handedly saved Python and has on an upward trajectory since then. But if we remove a lot of these top languages and we look at some of these other ones, I like to look at like Dart, Swift, Scala, Rust, and Kotlin. Objective-C is sort of interesting to look at also. This is a crowd. Of course, Objective-C gets a little bit of a peak here that makes it harder to see the others in context. So I'll get rid of it for a moment, just enough to say, for a while, Swift was coming up while Objective-C was going down, and then they've both been going down. I think because the relative market share of the iPhone and App Store hasn't been quite as big of a deal, and people have not quite gotten Swift to catch on other platforms outside of Mac. Yeah, IAA plus ML, yeah, for sure. Anyway, so this is the sort of second tier of languages where Scala is the one that was already here a while back, and it stayed pretty flat across this time, which is actually pretty good of it, in my opinion. Dart came up because of Flutter, and I kept thinking that Flutter's not enough to keep Dart going, but it has stayed here overall, although some of its metrics are better than others. Rust keeps surprising me that, like, it seems like I hear about Rust more in the news, and like other big companies say, oh, Amazon or Microsoft says, we're doing Rust now. So I keep expecting this to go up, but it hasn't really, which surprises me. And it could be that Kotlin hasn't kept going up because of competition from Dart and even from Java itself, which has been picking up some of those features. So those are some thoughts I have on what's going on here. And I don't know everything, but those are some of the trends I think I see. Yeah, as far as NIM goes, the other thing that's really weird, let's quickly mention, Nix came out of nowhere in this quarter. And I mean, Nix is cool and all. I haven't used it, but it's cool. I understand why it's cool. But something makes me wonder which of these stats and how they're getting there. It shouldn't be this high. Lua's down here right now. Lua's been pretty flat overall, which is actually fine. I think Lua's a good language. I haven't studied it well enough. Yeah, Rust, I don't know why Rust isn't going up in the... This is the mean results. There are certain stats for which Rust is going up and ones for which is going down. Like stars, Rust is still going up. I don't know all what this means. I have to make guesses based on the data that I have. Yeah, I have heard Flutter's much better than React Native. I'm not sure I'm a fan anyway, but obviously it works for some people. Anyway, so the other thing, actually I should bring up something else that I noticed recently also. Let's grab a bunch of functional languages. Haskell, Clojure. If you notice the common trend here, feel free to speak up, although OCaml's been sort of more flat. Erlang. Let's see, Elixir. Elixir's not quite the same trend. It's a little bit flat recently. You see its growth there. F#. If you notice that the common trend here that all of them have is that they've all been sort of going downhill since around 2015 or so. And if this is real, all these things are questions for all these statistics. Yeah, new version of Rust is super cool. Rust 2021. Pretty subtle the changes they made for backward incompatibility. But still cool. I love the whole additions concept. I think it's fantastic. But anyway, though, all these things around 2015, a lot of these functional languages have been going downhill, which is interesting because we talk about how functional is becoming more popular. And I just think about this past week. Yeah, so there's a decline in functional languages, and I think this might be real. All these things are like, here's numbers I have. Are they real? I don't know. But I think this might be real. Yes, Gideon, that's exactly what I think and hopefully that's best I know how to pronounce it in English. Sorry for your name. But for everybody, I know English and I know Spanish pretty well, and everything else I have to just pretend on. Um, but the but yeah, I think it's because other functional patterns get done in other languages. So it's, in other words, there's less competitive advantage to using OCaml or Haskell or F sharp when when all of a sudden you have pattern matching and better expression support and things uh, for example, Rust or even Java or other languages. And so as functional picks up in other languages, or C sharp, as functional picks up in other languages, and they already have market share, and market share and community and support are really strong competitive advantages. So when you lose the linguistic advantage of getting those features into functional languages, that's my guess why the functional languages have actually been on decline. When I say decline here, it could be there's more users than there were 5 years ago. It could be a very healthy community. It's just that relative in the overall percentage market share, they've been going down. And I think it's because other languages have been getting functional features. Okay, thanks, Gideon. R down. Yeah, I found that interesting. When you look at the scientific computing languages, we have R, we have Julia. And of course, R, my mean here shows R being relatively flat recently. Jupyter Notebook market share is going up. This tells you something. Of course, you can do lots of languages in Jupyter, but usually it's Python. And basically, I think it's just called, there's a lot of good languages here, and they have healthy communities. But market share wise, Python is just getting the job done for people. Yeah, Python's got a really rich ecosystem. In fact, the video, let's say I have a collaboration video almost out now with another channel, and we're talking about Python and running Python code on GPU and stuff. And really, I mean, there's just such a huge ecosystem for Python that you can do almost anything with it, independent of the inherent capabilities of the language. Okay, on the other hand, adding those patterns to OO languages while making people get interested in functional langs. Okay. Yeah. So you're gonna say people, because I learned, functional stuff in Java, and now I'm going to switch. Well, maybe I'll just go directly to Scala or F sharp instead or something. Yeah, let's go back to Nim. Left field language. I can mention some languages. There's some smaller languages that I haven't spent time in, but I want to. And which ones that I think will win? That's hard. Winning is hard. Cool is easy. Winning is hard to predict. But yeah, here's Nim. Nim has apparently an upward trend. The thing is, the lower you are, let me see. J might not be here. Oh, there's J, but J is sort of like whatever. These statistics are not 100% real. So, for example, Zig still does not appear in here, which is, and they're pulling the queries directly from the BigQuery tables and the data that, that GitHub exports. And there's totally repos in Zig. Zig totally has things going on, but they aren't in the data here yet. So I don't know what kind of internal problems exist in the data export from GitHub that some things haven't appeared yet. But so I presumably there are repos using J, but it acts like there's not anything. Anyway, let me get rid of this here again. So Nim does seem to have an upward trajectory. And in fact, the thing is, there's also the issue of, this is again market share. So Nim, for example, has a very healthy community, independent of its small market share. And then as far as like niche things go, the also question is, where do people go for their niche content? If you look at my videos here, when you say sort by most popular, and we see here, 2 of my top 10 are the Nim and the Zig videos here. And these continually get more hits, more views than any of my other old interview videos. Look, we see that Julia's not too far behind over here. And the thing is it because these are some of the best options available on the internet for learning from Andreas Rumpf or from Andrew Kelly? Or is it, sorry, back to Roger Hui, back to Jay, you're right. Anyway, so I'm getting back and forth, so I keep getting distracted, which is maybe good or bad that I get distracted. But yeah, I did see that Roger Hui passed away. I have not used J, I've used APL a little bit. Also the name skipped my mind. The Coderport channel. He's a really big fan of APL and those array languages, and so I pay attention a little bit to array languages better because of him. And so yeah, I was noticing the J news this week and Roger Hui, who passed away. I think that was a battle with cancer, and that's an unfortunate situation. Anyway, so back to these languages here, though. Yeah, so it's Zig doesn't even appear officially on the stats, but I get lots of hits every week on the Zig interview and on the Nim interview, and they get more views than any of my other old interviews do on a regular basis, and so they provide a lot of traffic to my channel comparatively. Okay, thank you, Mike. Anyway, so the thing is, these have strong communities behind them, and the question is, of course, I actually think Zig attention is going up across the board, but it also could be, like I said, this might be one of the best sources for background on Zig, and so when people look for Zig, they find this video. And Code Report is great. Another channel that's sort of like mine, but a little bit less diverse, is M Coding. He covers Python primarily, but sometimes gets into C, C++, and other languages as well. But yeah, anyway, so I like I said, Nim looks like it probably is going up if these stats are real, but it doesn't go up like crazy. The thing is, I think for all these languages, it might be really cool languages, but getting like market share and attention when there's a competitive advantage to just having a large community, that makes it hard for languages to take off, of course. Other languages, though, that I think are really cool that I want to look into in the future. Grain language is one that's really got my eye recently. Hi, and thanks. So I pronounce your nickname Kakshi because I pronounce an A. But in any case, though, he's a great contributor. In fact, the one person I've had who's contributed to Languish before, so that was really awesome, and helped me convert this to React. And I haven't kept this up as well. But anyway, one thing I want to really, I don't know TS coding. Thanks for the tip. Anyway, the one thing I want to add, by the way, I actually have a branch for sort of adding Stack Overflow to Languish. The thing is, I've had trouble getting the CSS that I want. Once I have more things to choose from here, I want to have a separate thing here to control the weighting of each, so you can make your own mean by controlling the weights. And I spent some time working on that, and then I was like getting a little bit hung up on exactly how to lay it out, and then I didn't get back to it. Otherwise, I might have Stack Overflow in here already. And I've also looked how to get data for other sources. But if someone wants to contribute, and by the way, I actually had a pull request for Languish because I was being slow to update to Q3 this year, and someone gave a pull request a few days ago, but like they put in, like I saw it right after I'd made the update myself, so I feel bad. Yeah, if someone wants to help with this, I have a branch called SO for Stack Overflow where I'm trying to work on a UI, but I just haven't gotten back to it. I worked on it a few days, a little while, like months ago, and didn't get back to it. Anyway, so, but as far as other languages I want to look forward to that are small languages, Grain is one I want to look at. The cool thing about Grain is there's no need to say I focus on WASM first, WebAssembly first, but I still think it's cool anyway that they focus on WebAssembly for Grain. And it's actually written in Rescript, I think, if I remember correctly. I have to review the repo. But one of the cool things about Grain, where are we at? Maybe it's better to look at the full documentation, pattern matching. What I think is cool about Grain, the sad thing is it's garbage collected. I'm really into like trying to figure out how to avoid garbage collection while still finding ways to be safe. And I think Rust is obviously one good way to look at that, but I'm wondering if there's other ways. But in any case, Grain is garbage collected. But it's primarily targeting WebAssembly. Just that's trying to be a selling point. I think Odin's awesome, by the way. Yeah, thanks for bringing up Odin. I think Odin's a great language. Maybe I'll give the spoiler. The interview I'm working right now is actually an interview on Odin. So there's the spoiler, but we'll get to it later. I already talked to him a week or two back, and I just haven't gotten the video edited yet. Anyway, but so and I think Odin's a fantastic language as well. Anyway, so but this Grain language is basically fits a lot of the traditional, functional, ML type feel. Only it's put together in a very approachable fashion. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing where Grain goes. That's one language. And then another language that I really want to look into a lot is Coca. For people who haven't heard of Coca, so Coca is an effects language where they try to focus on managing your effects. Like the idea of a pure function in Haskell, they say, pshaw, no, that's not pure enough for us. And I don't know, it's been a while since I've looked at this page, but I highly recommend looking through this. And I really wanted, there's like a couple of videos I want to do at least already, maybe 2 or 3 videos where I want to include Coca. It's a relatively approachable language still. And it uses effects to control things like, randomness or IO, or even whether the function is, I forget the term, for a complete function, whatever, where you are guaranteed to actually terminate. And that's the thing, is that they have like a special level of function where they can guarantee you terminate versus potentially, infinite loops on it and so on. Any new Beam languages? Well, there are a number of Beam languages. I still watch Gleam most. I totally want to cover Gleam sometime. I want to interview the guy for Gleam as well as start including it some more. And in fact, one of the things I'm actually going to be, spoiler on the current collab video I'm working on, looking at NX with Elixir a little bit in that. And one of the things that makes me sad about Beam language, so I love the fact that NX is providing like good numeric support to Elixir, but I wonder can Gleam take advantage of NX easily? I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, so I totally want to look at, I want to include some Grain and some Coca at some point. But Coca especially, Coca's got so much cool stuff in it. I highly recommend go look at Coca. Some awesome garbage collection / reference counting in Coca as well. Sort of in the ballpark of the kinds of efficiency they're trying to do in NIM. Modern... oh yeah, context free. Yeah, context free is sort of abusive in calling the channel context free. I wasn't actually using it to mean the stuff, although one of my earlier videos I actually talk about the context free meaning a little bit of what it actually means. And now as far as C++, modern C++, I don't think it's out of steam, no. I think C++ is actually doing fine. So this is the trend I see for C++ here, and I think it's real. I think C++ is gaining momentum. So the thing is, C++ has value for it is that it actually is a very capable language. It shows the cruft because of the age, but I really actually sort of like programming in C++ anyway. And if you use it correctly, there's still a lot of noise, just because like the defaults, the way you ought to code C++ isn't necessarily the defaults for the language. So you have extra noise and ceremony around it because of that, in some cases at least. But C++ really, I don't hate programming in it. I sort of like it actually. And a lot of the new features they have, the thing is there's just so much effort around it. Like the new modules, for example, it's like, you have modules in the language, but so much is defined by the compiler and the build system because there's so many parties that have to be satisfied with what comes out of C++, that it's hard just to say, here's the simple solution and here's how it's just going to work. And C++ has that difficulty as a result. And so I expect C++ will continue to be important. The other thing about C++ is that, again, it's a capable language. You can do things you have to jump through some hoops, but you can make what you want to have happen in C++ if you want to. And there's this huge code base of C++. And template-heavy C++ is hard to interact with from other languages. The right way to interact with C++ is at the source level. And so you're basically stuck having a C++ compiler around if you want to interface with C++. And but I hear like NIM, for example, I hear NIM is great for interfacing with C++ compared to some other options out there. Yeah, the build system for sure. I usually use CMake for C++, but it definitely has its cons. Oh, and I can see the comments on adopting types. Yeah, I think static typing is going to continue to grow. Static typing has been growing in Python. More and more I see projects that are using static typing in Python, for example. I've switched over to where almost all the time, if I can, I use static typing in Python. Sometimes I find a little bit awkward, but it's not as static Python and typing is not as rich as TypeScript. TypeScript, in my opinion, is way more pleasant for static typing than Python is, but Python's still getting much better over time. Okay, I see a question earlier about Denno / Node compatibility. I have not tried hard to look at the compatibility between Denno and Node, although I know some people are working on that. I think that Denno's great. there's times I've tried to use like Denno for something, and it's like I find that for this particular thing, it's actually hard to use Denno. So, for example, the live stream I did previously, where I was uh, using the Python parser and then generating Zig from it. I was going to I actually wanted to use TypeScript first for that instead of Python, because I'm actually not the biggest fan of Python syntax. It's inflexible in certain ways and sort of awkward. But the thing is that I was trying to see things I want to use. I wanted to use Denno because just everyday usage of Denno is so much easier than everyday usage of Node. Denno has, TypeScript out of the box. It has a formatter out of the box. It has a linter out of the box, and it's just easier. It's just like I just want to like write some TypeScript and run it, and Denno's way easier to work with out of the box than Node is. But like I had a really hard time, and maybe I just jumped through hoops wrong because I haven't used it enough because I haven't used it a whole lot. I just do too many things and I have my day job and stuff. But but for Denno, what I wanted to do is I wanted to use a TypeScript compiler from Denno and then compile from TypeScript to Zig. The thing is, I tried jumping through a few hoops to try to figure out how to use a TypeScript compiler from Denno, and there probably is some easy solution, but I was having a hard time getting it to work. And I'm like, well, I can set up Node. I'm like, no, there's just that built-in AST parser that's just built into Python. And so I had like zero effort to, get Python up and running. Plus, I want to try the new Python pattern matching. So between the Python pattern matching and AST parser out of the box, including with the type parsing built into Python, it was just easier. Yeah, Denno uses V8. It's just that the overall way of handling modules and stuff is completely different, of course. And so I'd love to see Denno take off. Although the thing is with Denno, Denno and WebAssembly and other things have some things in common. This whole secure by default, no file network or environment access unless explicitly enabled. The problem is that there's sort of like a little bit too much all or nothing. It's sort of too easy to say, I can't run Denno anything useful without saying, please give me network support. So then I'm always running it by default with network support turned on. Does it release more secure? I don't know. But I still think the default sandbox of Denno and WASM are the right way to do things for security purposes. In fact, I think web browsers in general have it all wrong. Part of the security problems about web browsers, I thought they could communicate with the server in the first place. By default, I think and no one wants to make these backward incompatible anymore, but I think the right way to do security for the web is if I load a web page, it cannot talk to the server. It's sandboxed in my browser, it's client only, and it cannot send web requests to other websites. So I should have to enable a web page to talk to its own server or any other website. If web pages did this, then I could have much more available web pages. Like so. What's not so much wrong is that maybe I probably don't need permission to access my own file system, but there are things that we think of as security risks, like full screen. Can full screen browser pretend to be a browser, pretend to click other links? There was those kind of things back in the day. If your web page by default couldn't even talk to the web server, couldn't talk to the internet at all, then I think you could have a richer client with still fewer security concerns. And so I think things like Denno and WASM that are like super sandboxed by default is a great thing to have happen, but there's again the question of if I'm always enabling things so I can run anything, then did I really have a sandbox in the first place? I don't know. Yeah, so those are some thoughts I have on that. Have I been talking too much? People didn't ask questions for a while. Let me go see. 18 concurrent viewers, okay. And I also have my list of topics here. Okay, actually there's one thing I sort of want to talk about. But let's do a question first. So WASM was interesting. I think I'm sort of only interested in WASM in some ways, which is sort of funny. Yeah, Denno extensions are the trouble. WASM has... If WASM doesn't go away, if browsers don't say, well, no, it didn't have an attraction, let's delete it. Unless browsers say that for WASM, then it's going to stick around and you can take advantage of it. In my opinion, to me, that's totally the right way to write client applications. I usually just use TypeScript when I'm going at things quickly. Traditional programming languages. Okay, I'll answer that in a second. My background. So the thing is, in my opinion, the right way to write client applications. So WASM is new JVM. The thing about WASM is A, it's more compatible with things, and B, it's more secure than the JVM. So it's like a win-win on WASM. The thing is, if it doesn't go away, then you can take advantage of it. And what it means is that for languages that have pretty good support, like Zig, I just out of the box I can compile WASM and Zig. Rust you can sort of. There's last time I tried it at least there was a little more hoops to jump through, but not that bad really. So if a lot of these compilers are coming out with WASM support by default, in my opinion, really if you care about a client, you should write your client in a native language because it'll on average perform better. And B, you can write most of your code in a fashion such that it's also usable for native apps. And the thing is, even if you prioritize a web user interface for your native app, most of your code is still going to be, you can still write it in a compatible fashion that's usable for any kind of native stuff as well as you want to. And oh good, it happens to work with your web browser user interface as well. So I think web GPU and WASM and Friends, in my opinion, there's webgpu.h. I highly recommend. I really want webgpu to finally get into browsers, but if you search for webgpu.h, basically this is a standard that they're working on in the Dawn implementation for webgpu from Google, which is written in C++, and the WGPU implementation, which is I think mostly being run by Mozilla, but I could be running that wrong. They have this standard that they both export, which is a C API for interfacing to WebGPU. So you can write a native application that uses WebGPU for compute and for graphics, and then say, well, okay, I'll also export this into a browser, and so it's like a win-win to me. I'd love to see this kind of direction. Anyway, so there's a question earlier about my background. So my background is I'm just a computer programmer. I just have a day job computer programming. I think there are times I got really into, and I've been like, I try to control my fanboyism a little bit these days. You can tell there's some things I'm a bigger fan of than others in the sense of I tend to cover them more. But there's been times in the past like, this is definitely a thing. I've got to push this thing. I've been around for enough decades where I've gone through different phases. And I tend not to be all out fanboy of anything. Sometimes to certain people, but not of any particular thing. And so I don't see myself as belonging to any particular programming language community. Though at times I've tried to do that, or at times I've tried to make my own language. But it's just like, I think there's a few things I really am interested in, and one of them is languages. And it's because, as a programmer, we spend a lot of time programming in a language. So I spend time thinking about why should this language should be different? Why do I have to do this or that in this language? And so I assume a lot of us might come from that background. And so I spend time thinking about language, thinking about what would I do? And then I look at other languages out there, and I just find it interesting. The thing is, I don't have a formal background, like an academic background in like programming language theory, although I'm hoping to do a video at some point. I need to study it more. There's like certain notation they use in programming language papers. And I think so I want to learn better theory over time because I want to be able to communicate with the theorists and understand, because a lot of really good stuff happens in academia. It's just hard to approach. Some people think academics are like too ivory tower or obscure, and they try to be obscure and elitist on purpose. Some do, but a lot don't. It's just that when you have your own notation and your own language about how you describe things in your own community, it's easier. So for them, it's easier to talk back and forth. It's clear to use the terminology when they say term, or when they say I forget the various things, but there's lots of different vocabulary. And there's all kinds of different techniques and things and theories that if you're in a community, you know what those things mean. And so it's easier to communicate back and forth when you already have that language to talk about. But it's hard for people from outside to approach it. But a lot of good things happen in, for example, things like Coca. Coca is a research language that they try to make things approachable. So the thing is, I want to learn more theory, but even if I learn more theory and I'm trying to do that, I want to make sure that, what I'm interested in and the people I want to talk to are people who are experienced programmers that aren't theorists. So even if I manage to learn some theory, and even if I might have a video where I try to learn how certain notation works and communicate it so people can read papers better, including me. I don't want to get into a world where all I talk about is monads and entailment and things like that. Because I want to make sure that when theory is discussed, whatever I manage to learn and how to communicate that properly, I want to make sure that it's approachable to other people who are experienced programmers but also not programming language theorists. Anyway, JSDoc plus TS types for type checking instead of writing TS. You could do that, AHSZ. I'm not a fan. I'd rather have it built into the language. I want to have, I like low overhead, and the more overhead to put into making something be happy for me, the less I'm happy with it. So I'd rather not use JSDoc. I'd rather just do things in TypeScript personally. Anyway, some other, let me see. Oh yeah, okay, so a couple things I want to bring up. It'll change the topic. I really want, if I wrote a mathematical formula, it doesn't understand them yet. Okay. Yeah, anyway, so I really want to do a convention, a context-free con sometime. If it weren't for the pandemic, lovely COVID, I might have tried to do something already. I don't know if I could do it or not. So, you're about to talk about, Jonathan Blow. Yeah, Blow won't talk to me about interviews. I try to get Jonathan Blow's attention, talk to him. But so far he won't talk to me yet. Maybe I'll convince him to talk to me someday. But yeah, I want to do a convention sometime, and I'm not sure. Sort of feels silly. I've got imposter syndrome about everything, including my channel. I was like, well, I'll do a channel anyway, even though I don't know if it's going to work or not. Maybe a convention wouldn't work either. But I want a conference, whatever you want to call it. I want to do some kind of conference, and possibly could do it nearby me, or possibly could do it in Europe. Actually, what I really want to do is Mexico City, but it's more of reach for more of the viewers. But I'd like to do a conference sometime. I'm also scared about carbon footprint of flying people around the planet. But I want to do a conference anyway, and what my goal would be, probably do like a 2-day conference. And what I would want to do is get programming designers. It'd be fun to have a variety of, like, if I could get Andreas Rumpf and Andrew Kelly and maybe somebody from the Rust core team, anyways, people like that. So like various people that I've interviewed or people I haven't interviewed, and try to get them all into the same conference. I'd obviously have to pay some of them to, in fact, any speakers have to pay. But what I'd like to do is have a number of different people from different languages who usually aren't in the same place because they're not the same, especially if they're not the same kind of languages, and be able to listen to various language designers all in a row talk about things. So the question is, can I make this happen? So the way I imagine I could make this happen is I could try to talk to some people first. In fact, as I have more context through the interviews I do, more people know who I am, then my thought is like, maybe I could contact those people and say, hey, could you show up at this and such a time and give a talk with a conditional, say, this only goes forward if I get enough people on board to actually attend. But if we get on board, can I have a possible, a preliminary commitment from you to be able to give a talk and figure out what that payment would have to be for someone to show up. And then what I would imagine doing is then going to Kickstarter and saying, Kickstarter says basically the only thing is you pay to attend the conference. And if I get, at least X number of people signed up, then we're going to have it because I already have the prepayment and we can move forward with it. And it's just the more people past the threshold that show up, the bigger a venue I can do. Yeah, context-free con. Someone said, let me see if I can type it myself. I brought this up once on Twitter, I think, and this was one recommendation I got, which is also sort of funny. Context-free with a capital C-O-N. I'm sort of inclined for the context-free con, but anyway, I really want to do it sometime. Cons, that's good too. And I'm sort of weird. I'm biased toward trying to actually make a profitable event. I don't know if I could. Thing is, I really appreciate the people who have made some donations, including some people who are on the chat right now have made donations. I really appreciate that. There is, if I don't turn on ads, there's a limit to what I'm going to ever get from donations. The thing is, I'm not really doing this for money right now, but part of me says, what if I could? And if I could turn this into money, making money, could I actually quit my day job? Right now, I'm nowhere near that. I've only made, a very small amount so far. Dollars per hour is in the pennies, kind of thing for the time I spent on this, and pennies per hour isn't exactly how you quit your day job. But so the convention, the conference, I actually be tempted to see, and what people say making a for-profit conference, actually turning a profit on a conference is hard. I'd try to see if I could figure it out. Maybe there could be a way. I want to have the cost for a ticket be competitive with other conferences, so no one's paying extra. I just wonder, could I actually figure out how to keep the costs down enough such that I could actually make money on it? I've also considered doing Patreon. Maybe you guys don't like me talking about making money, but I think it could be nice to make money. Like I said, it could be a way to say, if I could convince myself I could make money doing this, maybe I could figure out how to spend more time doing it. And so far, I don't see a path to that, which is why I haven't even said, hey, go give me money on Patreon, because that could help me spend more time on it. Thing is, unless I can actually quit my day job, I can't spend more time on it. So it'd be like I'd have to build up huge amounts of donations over time, and I don't know how to make that happen, which is why I haven't pushed too hard on the donations thing in the first place. But I've thought, should I open up Patreon? Is that a good idea? I don't know. So that's why I haven't pushed super hard on trying to make money, because unless there's actually a path to sustainability, then I can't quit my day job. And if I can't quit my day job, then, it's nice to have tips. I really appreciate it. I really do appreciate it a lot. It just doesn't help me quit my day job unless there's a lot of money. And so I just haven't worried about money too much yet, even though, like I said, I really do appreciate people who made donations. It helps me feel like what I'm doing has value when that happens. Anyway, what other topics that I want to bring up? There's a few things I wanted to talk about. Let me see what they were. Okay, yeah, one thing I want to talk about also, I'll probably have a video on this at some point, but in terms of how I'm a big fan of WASM, there's this thing. So there were two kinds of jams I was considering starting when I first started my channel. One was basically the first half year of my channel, I started thinking about I should run a jam. And there are two jams I wanted to do. One was a programming language jam, where you have to make programming languages. And then Replit did one of those, and then JT did that recently. And one of the reasons why I pushed JT's Lang Jam so hard, you get you in a hot tub and on Twitch to get the real pounds. Okay, the real money. I hear it is easier to monetize on Twitch. I have heard that. Thing is, I would have to figure out how to transfer people over there. I have to figure out how to use Twitch. I don't know the community at all. I never watched Twitch, so it's not something I can easily adapt to, and it's not something I consume myself. I do watch YouTube. I usually don't watch tech on YouTube. Every now and then I'm like, oh, there's a really cool talk. I'll go watch that talk. Or even for other tech YouTubers who are sort of in the same style as I am, I'll watch their videos sometimes. But usually, GDCCon, game developers, GDCCon is one of the places that I occasionally go and binge GDC talks. Occasionally, but only sometimes. But yeah, I don't ever watch Twitch. I don't watch live streaming. And so it's harder for me to think about, producing in that fashion as well. So I don't know. But WASM, so programming language jam is one thing I really wanted to do, and I thought it'd be fun to run. And I'm thinking I might actually advise toward actually helping JT next time they do Lang Jam. I might actually help out. I'll see what I can contribute there. But WASM, for the other thing I wanted to do was make a fantasy console for WebAssembly. And then once I had a fantasy console for WebAssembly, and I was going to do probably a little more Amiga 500 to 1200 level capabilities. I was an Amiga user back in the day, and I just had this super soft spot in my heart for Amiga computers. And so I was probably going to make it more Amiga capable. But Doge ad in the description. And we had a programming language jam. JT had one. I'll probably continue to support JT instead of make my own language jam at this point. Though it depends on how things go in the future. But the other thing I wanted to do was a WASM Fantasy Console Jam. And the reason why I wanted to do a WASM Fantasy Console Jam was because it's an opportunity. I think, first of all, making games is fun. I've done a tiny bit of toy game dev. And in one of my alternate lives, I'm a game developer. Maybe a lot of us fit in that category. X16 computer. What is the X16 computer? I don't know what that is. Commander X16. Is this a modern retro computer? Okay, is this like in the 16 suggests you're trying to look, is it 8-bit? 16-bit? That's a weird name for it. C64. So it's supposed to be like C64 style. Wow. By the way, my first computer was Tandy MC10. I had it attached to a black and white TV. And there's actually an emulator on this. This is the computer. We had like this expansion. This like gave you up to like, I think, 24K of RAM from the 4K of RAM it came with or something like that. Anyway, and I hooked up to a black and white TV. There's actually an emulator online that someone made for this. Where'd it go? Here it is. It's so funny. How does it start? It's not starting for some reason right now. Anyway, though, so yeah, I think this right here is like below the level of... Interesting. Last time I was here, I could just like type in basic. Where's my basic at? Anyway, whatever. Back when Commodore 64 is out, I had things that were weaker than a Commodore 64, even though I ended up getting an Amiga later. But anyway, so the thing about WASM 4 is a Final Fantasy console, one of these rather limited ones, like 4-color palette kind of things. And so what I'm probably going to do, I've been talking to the guy who started up this WASM 4 thing, and they have examples already finished in Go and Rust and C and just WAT, the WAT text format. And I want to try to get some things up in Zig and Odin as well. I probably, what sounds like it's going to happen is I might actually run a jam of my own, a game jam for WASM 4 on itch. And the reason why it's still relevant to my channel, of course, is because, and the reason why I care about it in the first place is because there's a variety of cool languages that weren't designed for WASM but can compile to WASM. And so I think the idea, and this is 64K RAM limit, by the way, this is pretty fun still. So the idea of running a game jam where you can use arbitrary languages, I think is cool. Of course, arbitrary languages compile to JavaScript as well. But to me, the cool thing about WASM is that WASM exists outside the browser, and they're actually working on a native client for WASM 4 as well. It's not as capable as the web-based client, but the fact that you can like just load up WASM applications into a browser or run them on a lightweight client separately with just the same binary, I think is really cool. And in fact, so separately from actually considering making my own WASM engine, which of course I don't have time to do these side projects very well. But I was considering making my own WASM engine just so that I could throttle and control the execution speed, which I don't think WASM 4 has any throttling built in. They just have memory limits and so on built in. And they use a callback architecture as opposed to you control the loop. And so I was considering where you could control the loop and have throttling involved, but I didn't get very far on that. But github.com/context-free-info. This work? I don't remember how GitHub URLs work. Yeah, okay, here we are. I have multiple different things up on GitHub. One of them is, so I have a context-free code where I put up all my code samples for my videos. And I own the contextfree.info domain name, but I haven't done anything useful with it. But I have a context-free info. Someone already had context-free in GitHub before I got here, so I couldn't take context-free. But context-free info goes along with my context-free.info, and that's also why I'm at context-free info on Twitter. But this is something that this is a total hack thing I just was slamming together one day 2 months ago, apparently now. This is similar to the notion of like WASM 4, but it's purposely not limited. So the idea here is that it should be possible to write an application here. This is me just proving that I could load stuff up. So I wrote just a simple thing in Zig and a simple thing in AssemblyScript. Oh yeah, I have AssemblyScript demos also for WASM 4. I think AssemblyScript is a very clever idea. I would have done it slightly differently than they're doing it, but it's still very clever. But anyways, both these things I have examples. I can load up and run binary WASMs from both of those inside of this. So Takana, I just pick random names for things, just to mention what Takana is. Takana is a volcano that's on the Mexico-Guatemala border. It just sounds cool. I love the name. So anyway, but so this is just a hack project I started one time with the idea. This is super hacky. I just was slamming code together here in Zig. I actually started it in Rust first, and both my dependencies, both the WASM engine I'm using and the WebGPU engine I'm using are both in Rust. But I got tired of waiting for the 6-second rebuild, relink, static builds, etc. For the Rust compiles. And so I just, because it's just a hack thing, I'm like, well, instead I just imported the and there's a standard wasm.h header for running wasm engines, and there's a standard webgpu.h for running webgpu. And then I just threw in SDL also. So this right here is some quick hack code where basically I load up SDL and show a window in it, also load up some wasm and run that. And it's funny, both libraries I'm consuming here are written in Rust, but I'm consuming them through CAPI and Zig. And so this quick hack code here is all it does. And I just read basically a tutorial for how to do this in C, and I copied their code and tweaked it for running from Zig here instead. But the idea here is that you should be able to make a runtime engine that that you can write arbitrary native code for, compile it to WASM, and then you can run your apps either in a browser or in on a native client. And the native client isn't one that includes a whole web browser. It's just a native client that's very lightweight. And the idea, you probably would have to go along with WASI also, WebAssembly System Interface. But anyway, so that's something, and there's a lot of people who talked about, should we add WebGPU to WASI? And I think it's a great idea, minimal windowing. Anyway, so that's some fun stuff I like to do. But I said, look for possibly me running a game jam on WASM 4 sometime in the next few months. Let me see. I need to get off soon. I said it'd be less than an hour, so I need to get off soon. And I'll mention really briefly Rio programming language. Let's just go here for now. So funny, when I first started the channel, I was trying to make my language. I'm always trying to make a language. I change what it does over time, and if I started this up again, I would change it again. But whatever language I'm doing, I've been calling it Rio for years and years. It's possible I could get back to this. Part of me has a little bit of a hankering to like make a software project. But of course, if I spend more time on a software project, I mean, I spend less time on the channel. But anyway, some part of me wants to get back to making a language someday also. Anyway, people have been quiet for a while. Maybe I've been talking too much. Anybody have any last minute questions they want to ask before we close off for today? Doesn't sound like it. Anyway, if I do get to this idea of a conference sometime, like I said, I'll probably end up doing it in Southwest US to start with because it's easier for me to get there. The reason why I didn't do it in Europe, it's funny, look at statistics. If you look at any one country, the country with the most viewers I have is the United States. But if you look like geographic region, okay, cool. Thanks for the feedback on Rio and WASM 4 Jam. Since I've been in touch with the guy who made WASM 4, but the region where I have the most, the Odin interview whenever I finish getting it edited. I have not, okay, go to the effects question here. Effects in OCaml. I know they're working on an effects system for OCaml for their multi-core OCaml also. Brendan Zaborowskis might be his name. There's a guy who I often interact with. He knows programming language theory a lot better than I do, who keeps reminding me of the effects system coming in OCaml and multi-core OCaml. I have not played with that. I need to look at that. I am very minorly interacting with an effects system in a language called Dex for the collaboration video I'm working on right now, but not in depth. The language I've looked at effects the most in is Coca, but I probably should actually just do a video on effects at some point, and I could talk about Dex and Coca and OCaml and things. But I have not studied enough to have a good discussion of it at the moment. And like I said, there's related topics around that for Coca that I want to get into as well. And Coca is my favorite language right now for looking at effects, but I'm new at it, so maybe I don't know the things I should look at. The Odin interview, whenever I get it edited. I'm scrambling to get this collaboration video out right now. The Odin interview will be the next video out after that. And then I'll probably fit another. I have another interview scheduled with very high profile language designer for later in the year. But I'll probably get another video before that. Yeah, effects are a hot new topic. And I'm still not sure what I think about effects overall, but I need to learn them better to have a better opinion. But yeah, as far as my syntax here for Rio, I'm trying to figure out, I love end, but it can get really long sometimes. So I'll have to figure it out. Um, I'm such a fan of begin end, so I'm trying to figure out the right way to do it. But yeah, if I come back to my language at some point, likely we'll still have end keyword in it. It's very likely. Yeah, so the thing is, like, as I learn new things, it's like, what would I do in a language? Um, would I have effects in a language? I've gotten more and more toward the idea that at least the core of the language ought to be functional, because functional is really just easier to do. The thing is, but then you need things that aren't functional. So the question is, how do you expose non-functional things in a functional language? And effects are one way of doing that. There's also just a simple, unison. Okay, thanks for the tip on that. By the way, as a side comment on language, if I got back to my language, I'd be really heavy into the array of structured array type thing, but from a different perspective than most people have it. I also trying to figure out how to make, any component system / relational things work better, because I think there's some sweet spot for how to use relational things versus nested structures. Yeah, I get tired of the curly braces too, Gideon. It's funny. And of course, the question next is, how do I make more of my syntax use, less, fewer of the curlies and things as well. I'll have to think about that. But anyway, the thing I want to think about really hard in languages in the array of structured array type topic, people who've used pandas, I don't know if you've used it or not. Maybe some of you use pandas for Python or not. But it's like, pandas is really handy. It's really hard, but the thing is, so if you go to the pandas, I didn't know he'd given up. That's interesting. But if you go to the pandas, so for people who are not talking about pandas, not pistols for pandas, just pandas. One of the nice things about pandas is you have these, and it comes from R data frames. I haven't used R much, but my understanding is pandas is inspired by R data frames. And so the idea is you basically have tables, and you can simply say things, like, I want table name or column name, column age, column whatever. And you'll automatically get an array out of that. And if you ask for multiple, you get like a subtable. So it's sort of like SQL in a sense. The thing is, it's really hard to type, as in, static typing on pandas. It's like, you get this really rich data interaction language, and you lose all your ability to actually discuss what you're doing in any kind of static typing system in Python again. And the thing is, structured array of structs really is sort of just like a table in a database. And so there's this data access languages like XPath for XML from back in the day, for example. It's very similar to the idea of what you have in pandas also, or like CSS queries. It should be possible to say, like, I should be able to have, if I have an array of structs or structured arrays or whatever. By the way, Odin has some good array of structured array stuff as well. You should look at Odin in that. But if I have an array of structured arrays, and I say, like, an array of person, and I say .name on an array of persons, I should have an array of strings. Or if I say, I have a much longer struct than this, a lot more fields. If I say, give me the substruct, which is X, Y, and Z, then I should have, a new array of struct, which is X, Y, and Z. That's basically how pandas works. And if you use pandas, oh yeah, good point with Zig in the standard lib. That's right, they have been mentioned that recently. You should look at Zig for that as well then, for array of structured arrays. But the thing is, like I said, it's basically, pandas does this, just it does it in extremely dynamically typed fashion, and really it's efficient sometimes and inefficient other times. I just want to have a low-level language where I can manipulate data as easily as pandas, but ideally no garbage collection and ideally fully statically typed. Yeah, the static, yeah. I really, funny, the comp time, I'm such mixed on compile time stuff also. I've got to get off I said it'd be less than an hour. I have to get off just briefly here. But compile time and code execution, I really love static analysis. And so static analysis, because I like to be able to analyze my code. I like to say, where is this being used? How is this being used? I like that I can really quickly evaluate, parse time, just and limited, lookup time. What do I have and what composes my program? Whereas if you have really rich macros or really rich compile time execution, you get yourself into situations where, especially if it's Turing complete, that, how much pain can you go through just to know what your program's even doing? and yet it gives you huge flexibility. And Zig doing it at the user level because they have huge flexibility because of their compile time powers. And so, yeah, if I were also do a language, it's like, I probably wouldn't do full compile time code execution because of my bias against it, but there's so many good things you can do with it as well. Yeah, someday we'll have static reflection in C++, right? Someday. Yeah, in terms of removing the cruft, Zig just removes lots and lots of cruft in that category. Anyway, well, probably should go like I said I would so that I don't take up people's time too much. I have things I need to get to as well. It's early morning where I'm at right now, but today's a busy day for me. I got things to take care of out of the house, plus again, working on video, hopefully for next week as well. So thanks for showing up, everybody. I really appreciate you and the support for the channel. And probably live streams aren't really necessarily my thing. If I don't get into it more, maybe I'll at least do a yearly live stream for the anniversary celebrations. Thanks for stopping by and thanks for supporting the channel. Okay. See eye to eye on comp time then. Anyway, I'm going to sign off now. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Raku, I should look at... Raku is so noisy, but it has so many cool things in it. I should study it sometime. Bye, everybody. Or I should say, bye, y'all.